this is Mike Lux. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And yes, Dre and I go back 40 years, a little over, I think over 40 years now. We've been doing various political things together. So, and he's a dear friend. I want to start out today with kind of an overview. I am a lot more optimistic than a lot of people in the Democratic Party, and I think I feel sometimes when I'm in conversations about how depressed everybody is, and that we're talking ourselves into losing, that we're letting pundits define things for us, when in fact there's a lot of indicators that are good for Democrats this year, and I just want to start with the point is, in my experience in politics, DC pundits are usually wrong. Historically, you can go back, all the years I've been in national politics, they've been making predictions and pronouncements, and they're sure about XYZ, and then they turned out to be completely and totally wrong. And we don't have time for examples, but there are plenty of them over the years. So I just want to start with that point. I also want to note, and you all probably follow the polling. I know this is a very informed group, but ever since Roe v. Wade, and other things have been going on in this time period too, including the January 6th hearings, which have had a much bigger impact in terms of coverage and feelings, especially of independent voters. The gun horrors that we've seen, but there's a lot going on. But ever since Roe v. Wade, over the last several weeks, the polling has been moving in the Democrats' direction. The question is whether we can keep that going, and that's on the House generic polling, by the way. In individual races, if you dig down into individual races, on the Senate side, the polling is actually very encouraging. We lead in the latest public polling, as well as private polling I'm seeing. We lead in all four of the battleground seats that we hold, and we're also ahead in three battleground seats that we could pick up. And there's four other candidates within the margin of error. So we are very much in this ball game. We Democrats have a real chance to win. And I will note, the pundits are like, oh, Joe Biden's approval rating is down, therefore the Democrats will lose. It doesn't necessarily work that way. And I'll give you one example, which is Macron in France. His approval rating the day he won 59-41, his approval rating was 37%. Elections are choices; they're not referenda, right? They're not up or down. How are you feeling about Joe Biden? That's not what they're about. They're about who people are running against, what's going on. I would also say that our agenda is so much more popular than their agenda. And if you look at what the Republicans are talking about, the way they vote, that they are on the wrong side of almost every issue that Americans care about right now. There were only 5 House Republicans that voted in favor of codifying the fact that people can get birth control. How many politicians do you think are going to do well being against birth control? On abortion, on guns, on taxing the wealthy, on cracking down on profiteering, on lowering costs on prescription drugs, lowering costs on childcare. You go down the list, the Democratic agenda is so much more popular than what the Republicans are talking about, and what the Republicans say they're for. And that doesn't even get us into the Rick Scott agenda, which we should be talking about everywhere we go, which is to sunset every government program, including Social Security and Medicare, every 5 years. Their proposals are extreme and unpopular, and our proposals are mainstream and popular. So I want to make that point to folks. In terms of this Factory Towns project that Lisa mentioned, it's the focus has been working class voters, especially those who don't live in big cities and big city suburbs. I felt like this constituency is one that we've been losing a lot of ground with. And there's been a lot of sort of loose talk. Oh, the Democrats are losing working class voters. They have no chance with working class voters. But if you actually go in and you do, we've done polling, we've done a lot of different focus groups. We've looked at the voter files. We've looked at the economic data. We've looked at the census tract data. And what we have found is that there is absolutely a path in small and medium-sized working class counties with working class voters. There is absolutely a path for Democrats to do better. And by the way, this is something that Dre Samuelson has been preaching for the 40 years that I've known him. But this year it's more true than ever. Take the issue of inflation. Everybody says, oh, inflation is going to kill the Democrats. And it is a tough issue. There's no doubt about it. People tend to blame the party in power whenever anything goes wrong. But if you talk to working class voters in focus groups, and inflation is very much on their mind, and they're frustrated by it. But first of all, they don't actually blame Joe Biden for it. People are remarkably well informed about supply chain problems, about the Ukraine-Russia war, about everything going on that's driving up prices worldwide. They know that these are tough, intractable problems, so they don't automatically, by default, go to blaming the Democrats for it. But the other thing is that voters in working class counties especially know is that a lot of what's going on with inflation is profiteering and price gouging. And they see that, they understand that, and it's a very credible argument for the Democrats. And by the way, it's something that corporate CEOs brag about on their calls to their stockholders. Corporate CEOs are saying, "Oh yeah, we're using inflation as as the reason we're driving our prices up." They are very open when they're talking to their shareholders about this. And if you look at actual profits over the last year compared to what these companies usually make, it's actually stunning. Shipping companies have increased their profit margin 9 times in the last year. Their profit margins are 9 times higher than what they were the year before. Oil companies, record profit levels. Food companies, record profit levels. On oil, 28 cents out of every dollar are pure profit. It's usually down around 10 cents on every dollar. They are jacking up their prices, and that is part of what's going on with inflation. It's not all of it, but it's part of it. I also want to say that working class voters are actually quite, people talk about, oh, working class voters are not with us on social issues. And that's true of some social issues, but on the basics, on the abortion issue, working class voters, especially women, are very much in favor of the freedom to have an abortion. On birth control, they are very much in favor. On guns, they are very much in favor of eliminating AR-15s. And I mean, a lot of these people are people who hunt, people who own hunting rifles, but they are with us on most of the basic issues. And I want to make one more point about that. We tested in our both in our polling and in our focus groups, we tested the Republican message, the sort of their narrative, the so-called culture war narrative of the Republicans, and we tested what we felt based on everything else we were seeing, what the very strongest possible statement by the Republicans on those issues would be. All the flashpoint stuff that polls really well. When you compare that statement to our economic messages, we win hands down. Their statement that we tested was the weakest statement of all of the paragraphs or ads that we tested in focus groups. The economic messaging that we were talking about was far stronger. In some cases, 2.5 or 3 times stronger. There's a lot of pundits that talk about the working class is lost for the Democrats. They have no chance. It's just not true. We have to have a tough economic message that's focused on pocketbook issues. We have to talk in, sensible language, with people. But we should be raising the issues that we care about with working class voters just as much as voters in suburbs and big cities who are a little bit higher income. That's the main point I want to make. I want to say one more thing, which is that go back to what I said at the beginning. Democrats need to stop being depressed before any votes have been cast. We have a real chance to win this election, and I think the key to winning it is hope and passion. We have to show people why we care about electing Democrats, why Democrats are going to make their lives better, why we believe in the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates. And we have to do that with passion, and we have to be hopeful. People do not, if you're, there's a friend of mine who likes to say, if our message is the world is ending, we're in horrible shape, everything's going wrong, come join us. It's not the most effective message, right? We have to project hope. We have to project optimism. We have to project excitement and passion. And if we do that, I absolutely believe that Democrats can win the 2022 elections. And if we do, if we keep the House and we add 2 people in the Senate, we're going to pass a lot of great things in the next 2 years. And that's going to make the case for Democrats even better. So I'll stop there. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mike. That was really helpful. I am going to let Aaron curate some of the questions. And so Aaron, take it away.
Great. Okay, I've been logging some of the questions that are in the chat. Mike, first question for you. Do you coordinate with Working America? What is your opinion of them? Has any of your testing applied to them?
I love Working America. They do incredible work. As the one of their things in their title says. And we do coordinate on messaging. We share messaging back and forth with each other. Every time they do another analysis of the door knocking they send it my way. And vice versa in terms of the research that we're doing. Great organization, one of my favorites.
Great. And then a couple of questions just to get more detail about something you said. What was the statement exactly that was like the strong statement from the other side? And then which are the 3 Senate new seats races that are looking good? Which 4 are a toss-up?
So the statement, I'm not going to be able to say it word for word. I didn't memorize it because it's too repulsive. But the statement basically says Democrats are are extremist liberals who want to allow grooming of children by homosexuals, who want to teach critical race theory, and who embrace chaos at the border, and want new immigrants to be free to come into this country, in the millions. So something along those lines.
Mhm.
And then what was the other part of your?
Yeah, which are the 3 Senate races that are looking good? Which 4 are a toss-up? You mentioned a bunch of different races.
Yeah, so Fetterman right now, and again, all of these are going to be competitive races. I don't want to suggest to you that the polls aren't going to tighten up. But right now, in addition to the money lead that someone mentioned, Fetterman is up about 6 to 9 points, depending on which poll you look at. I think that will tighten up because Pennsylvania races always tighten up. So if the election were today, I would guess it would be a 3 to 4 point race. But right now he's ahead. Tim Ryan, interestingly enough, JD Vance has gotten a lot of hype, but he's this bizarro combination of Mitt Romney and Bain Capital combined with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and people do not like either of those things in Ohio. And so Tim Ryan, I saw one poll that had him up 10. I don't believe it's that high. I saw another poll that had him up 3. I think that's more likely. The other race that we're leading in right now, although it's closer, is Wisconsin, and it's a little confused because there's I think 5 different candidates in the Wisconsin primary, but the leading candidate right now, Mandela Barnes, is up over Ron Johnson by a couple of points in the latest polling I'm seeing, and other candidates, some of them are also up and some of them are slightly behind it. It's within the margin of error, but we have a slight lead, and Ron Johnson's favorables are only 37%. So we've got a very good chance in that race. In terms of the toss-ups, and by the way, all 4 of the incumbents that are in tough races are all ahead. Cortez Masto is the closest right now, but they're all in pretty good shape. The one toss-up that I want to mention that is sort of the surprise of the year is in Missouri. And again, we haven't had primaries yet, but in Missouri, the leading Republican candidate is Eric Greitens, who is this horrible, despicable man who was forced to resign as governor by Republicans in the legislature because they were so appalled by him. But he's leading in the polls right now by a considerable margin in the primary polls. The Democrat who's leading in the primary polls, Lucas Kuntz, is a great young candidate. I mean, just outstanding, with a great message. He's done a great job of fundraising. He's only down 1. And if the race is between Greitens and Kuntz, it's 45-44. So it's within the margin of error. The other news out of Missouri is there's a third party candidate who is announced, who is a former clerk for Clarence Thomas, very conservative lawyer. I think he's out of St. Louis. And I think he's going to draw some Republican votes. I think he was so appalled at the idea of Greitens being the Republican candidate that he couldn't stand it and decided to get in the race. So with that third party thing, that's another thing that may help us there. So I think Missouri is a race, where there's a lot of potential. In Florida and North Carolina, we're behind by a little bit, but it's close to the margin of error in both of those states. And now I'm forgetting the other challenger who's in decent shape. I'll come back to that. But there's one other one that's not currently within the margin of error, but surprisingly close, which is Iowa. Grassley is 88 years old, only 27% of voters said they wanted him to run again. The Democratic candidate is a very appealing retired U.S. Navy admiral. And in the latest polling that I've seen, he's only 4 to 6 points down. So that's another kind of a sleeper race to watch. And then there's one other race I'm blanking on. Hopefully I'll remember it before we're done, or someone will say, what about X race?
Got it. We have time for actually one more question. So there's a lot of great ones in the chat, which I think I will just call to your attention, and maybe you can feed answers back into the chat when we wind up here. But there's been a few questions about messaging, some worry that Fox News is having outsized effect in misstating and twisting Democratic messages. How do Democrats get their message across? What media could they use? How could they respond to people who refuse to accept the outcome of elections?
I don't think we should worry much about the people who refuse to accept the outcome of elections, because it's hard to change their mind, and B, they're a big minority. So I don't see that as something we should be spending a lot of time on. In terms of you're absolutely right that, I mean, Fox News is a big megaphone, and it's backed up by Sinclair News at the local level. It's backed up by all these radio talk show hosts. The death of Limbaugh does not mean that the right wing has any less popular radio hosts out there. They have a whole media infrastructure that they've been very smart about building over the years, and we need to do better about that in the long term. But I do think there are a lot of different ways of getting our message out. One is, all of you should think of yourself as your own media company, because you are. People. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, we have listservs, we have a lot of ability to move messages in the modern era, and to tell our friends, tell our family, tell our coworkers, people we go to church with, what we think about politics. And I really want to encourage everybody to do that, because when folks share with each other, even if you share with someone who's also a Democrat, they might not have heard that argument before, and it might inspire them to send it out to people who they know. So that's one way. There's a lot of good online organizations that have a lot of followership, a lot of membership. We can get things out through that way. People pay a lot of attention in our focus groups. By the way, interesting, in our focus groups, people in those focus groups had no more faith in Fox News than they did in any other national media source. They think all national media is pretty much biased, but they pay a lot of attention to local media, to letters to the editor, to local radio talk shows, to local TV things that they hear about on TV. So there are ways of getting our message out through those local media, and I think we should be very aggressive about working that passionately, and getting people on radio talk shows, getting people to do press conferences that local TV stations, news stations will cover. So yes, it is a challenge to get the word out, but all of us can help with that, and do a good job with it.
Great. And also, Mike, if I can just ask you in the chat, if you can put the name of your organization in the chat for everybody to see, and its primary purpose, just very briefly, that would answer someone's question and
Great.
get that going. But we really thank you for your time, your presentation, and some great practical ideas to get the word out. So I'm going to turn it back.
Well, and thank all of you for all of your incredible work. It's people like you that make me hopeful, because if we have a passionate group of folks who are working the doors, working the phones, working your social media, it's going to make all the difference.
Great. And we will also, any questions that don't get answered, Lisa can put in the newsletter. So maybe we'll also send you the unanswered questions.
Yeah,
there's some really good ones.
Happy to do that.
Okay, turning it over to Lisa.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. We really appreciate your coming.